पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः।
Namaste. Welcome to the third session on Bhagavad Gita, your source of inspiration by Jaya Row. I now request Jaya Ji to begin with her discourse.
We will start with the invocation.
सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यङ्करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः।
Chapter 4. Michelangelo had said that inside every block of wood or stone, there lies a beautiful statue. All you have to do is remove the excess material. Similarly, inside every human being dwells the divine you. The Bhagavad Gita helps remove the excess material of desire and ego and unravel the beauty within. In chapter 2, Krishna had given the definition of a perfect person, the state we all aspire for, consciously or unconsciously. This portion serves as not just the goal, but also the pathway to perfection. Chapter 3 comes down to our level. We all have to act in the world. We have to face challenges in the world. The Gita, chapter 3, gives us the technique of right action. It introduces the concept of yajna, the ancient Vedic ritual of havan or yajna, which we are all familiar with, but infuses a new meaning to it. Actually, it's not a new meaning, it's the significance of the ritual. He emphasizes it, which is working in the area of your swadharma for a higher cause. Chapter 4 helps you to perform yajna all the time, not occasionally, not once in a while, but every moment of your life. The law is, as you think, so you become. So, to become Atman, you have to think of Atman all the time. This is easier said than done because you have obligations to fulfill, you have duties to perform in the world, you have your goals and aspirations in the world. Besides, your thoughts by default rush out into the world for gratification. This portion gives a unique technique of aligning your thoughts with Atman while the body, mind, and intellect continue to interact with the world. This is done by converting every mundane action into worship. In the chapter, Krishna begins by saying that the most important quality a teacher needs is spiritual development. Because you can communicate only to the extent you have uncovered Atman and purified yourself. Atman communicates itself. It doesn't need you to develop oratory skills or singing techniques to communicate. And yet, this is the one thing that we don't focus on to become teachers. In verse 7, Krishna assures Arjuna that whenever there is a need, Atman will manifest itself. So let's take a look at verse 7.
यदा यदा हि धर्मस्य ग्लानिर्भवति भारत अभ्युत्थानमधर्मस्य तदात्मानं सृजाम्यहम्.
Whenever dharma or righteousness declines and adharma or unrighteousness increases, then I manifest myself, O Bharata. So the assurance is that dharma and adharma tend to turn around on themselves when anyone increases. Because when dharma goes down beyond a certain limit and adharma takes over in the world, then you find that an extraordinary person, a spiritually evolved person, arrives on the scene and lifts the masses, lifts the level of morality and ethics in the world to a higher level. So don't think that Krishna himself will come and you have some picture of Krishna's, that he plays the flute and wears a peacock feather and so on and so forth. That is not it. What he's saying is that some evolved person, some realized person will appear, and even if the person is not self-realized, someone who has higher values, someone who lives higher values, becomes a mini Krishna and inspires people around him to a higher level of living, of appreciation, of standard to follow. So, to the extent we evolve spiritually, we naturally take on this role of bringing adharma down and establishing righteousness. So, for what purpose are these avatars or realized persons visits to the world? In the next verse, in verse 8, he gives the reason for the manifestation. He says, Paritranaya sadhunam, to protect the good, Vinashayascha dushkrutam, to destroy evil, and dharma samsthapanarthaya, to establish dharma, virtue. I come yuge yuge, from age to age. Then Krishna moves to explain the relationship between Atman and action. Atman, the spirit, enables all actions, material or spiritual, divine or bestial. But Atman itself does not act. Just as electricity enables all electrical gadgets to function, itself does nothing. It is neither heated in a kettle, nor is it refrigerated in a refrigerator, nor does it move in a fan, nor does it get cool in an air conditioner. But without electricity, none of these gadgets will function. Similarly, Atman enables all actions, whatever be the quality of the action, but itself does not act. And Atman is not responsible for the quality of action, just as electricity is not responsible for the manifestation. It is the gadget that is responsible. Nor is Atman affected by the outcome of the action. Let's take another example. Petrol enables all cars to move, but itself does not move. It is not responsible for the quality of driving. It is the engine of the car and the driver that determine your experience, and is unaffected by the result. A driver may drive a car and have an accident, or carry the passenger or go safely to the destination. Petrol has nothing to do with it. So when you understand this, you become objective. And this is a quality that is extremely important, not just for spiritual development, it's a hallmark of spiritual development, but it is also important in the world, in worldly matters. So let's take a look at what this objectivity is in verse 18.
कर्मण्यकर्मया पश्येत् अकर्मणि च कर्म यः स बुद्धिमान् मनुष्येषु स युक्तः कृत्स्नकर्मकृत्.
One who sees inaction in action and action in inaction. Saha buddhiman manusheshu is wise among humans. Such a one is a yogi, united person, and karmakruts, a doer of all actions. So this is total objectivity. Now in the translation, in the verse itself, if you just exchange, replace the word inaction with Atman. So let's take examples, then you'll get it. Just as when you see the brilliant actor Amitabh Bachchan in all the roles that he plays, and when you see the actor, you see the potential for so many roles in him, then you understand what acting is. Then you won't get affected by the movie. Similarly, whenever you see manifestation, action, you see the inactive principle, Atman, behind it all. And when you conceive of Atman, when you think of Atman, you see the possibility for so many manifestations. So, this enables you to become objective. You don't get involved in the action. You don't get thrown off by the manifestation, which may be positive, negative, or neutral. For instance, a person may perform a divine role, a totally selfless action, which inspires you. But you understand there is Atman behind it. Atman is enabling it. So you're not carried away by it. Then you see a terrible action, a totally selfish action, where, let's say, a mother, because of her selfishness, tortures the child to excel in academics, in sport, in music, in dance, and destroys the well-being of the child. You get mad when you see this, but you understand it is Atman that is enabling this mother to function in the selfish way that she's functioning. So then you are unaffected by both the positive as well as the negative. And when you're sitting by yourself and studying the Bhagavad Gita and you think of Atman, unmanifest Brahman, then you see the possibility for so many worlds to emerge from that one power. So, such a person, saha yuktaha, such a person is a united one. He's constantly yoked to Atman, constantly in touch with Atman. He's merged with Atman. And he is the doer of all actions. The power of Atman resides in him. He's smart, alert, clever, dynamic, and energetic. Thus, he is successful in the world. He's happy as he's constantly aligned with Atman and does not get involved in petty, insignificant, foolish things that are happening around him. Saha buddhiman manusheshu. He is intelligent among human beings, buddhiman, which means the rest of us who are not objective, or to the extent we are not objective, we are utter fools. because we get involved in things. Not only do we get involved in things pertaining to our personality, our lives, we get involved with other people's lives, which is the height of foolishness. So this is a very useful verse, because when you go home, when you come home from outside and your spouse yells at you, don't get involved with the stupidity. Admire the expression of Atman. Let it be a reminder of God. The more the person yells and screams, the greater is the reminder of God. Thus, irrespective of what experiences you go through, because you're objective, you are at peace with yourself. Your mind is calm. Your intellect is clear. You're never confused in life. And when you perform actions, these actions are brilliant, perfect, successful. How do we get there? Work divested of doership and attachment changes its quality from drudgery to revelry. See, when you approach your work, you consider it drudgery. Oh God, I have to go to work. So you look forward to the weekend. The moment Friday comes, you're in holiday mode. And Sunday evening, you're in the blues, down in the dumps. Why? Because your approach to work is that of drudgery. That changes, it becomes revelry when you divest yourself of this doership. I am the doer attitude, egoistic, and attachment. Your work changes from indignation, your attitude changes from indignation to inspiration. And the quality of your work improves from mediocrity to excellence. So, actions backed by desire bind you with more desire. If you perform any action merely because you have a desire to perform it, that action boomerangs back on you as more desire in your personality. The same action dedicated to a higher cause, performed in a spirit of service and sacrifice, liberates you from existing desire. So the existing desire gets fulfilled. Because your attention is on something higher and not on yourself, you are not adding more impurity to your system. So whatever action you perform should arise from the clarity of the intellect and not mere whims and fancies of the mind. The mind should be content with what you have, and intellect focused on the higher ideal. Find fulfillment in the action itself. Just do your best. Do not crave for the fruit of action while performing the action, because then your mind shifts to the future and is not concentrating on the present. Besides, as we saw yesterday, you have no control over the fruit. In a movie called Peaceful Warrior, it's about 3 students from Stanford University who are gunning for the Olympic gold in gymnastics. So one of them is fully prepared, but he has a horrible accident just months before the Olympics. And he tries very hard to come back, but he's full of this anxiety, craving for the fruit, the Olympic gold. Because he says, all my life, that is the only thing that I wanted. His guru, who's a gas station attendant, and on the face of it, a failure, advises him and says, what kind of actions are you performing? Where the result is only mental agitation and stress. You have no control over whether you will be selected to go to the Olympics in the first place. And even if you're selected, you have no idea whether you will win the gold or not. It depends on how the others are performing. So you have zero control over the fruit. But nobody can take away the fact that you are an outstanding athlete. Just focus there, go out there and do your best. So when you do that, you gain this sense of fulfillment. You're happy, you're thrilled, you're blissful at just the completion of the action of doing your best. So you've already got your fruit. You're happy and you evolve spiritually because your desires go down. What more do you want? Whatever other people say cannot match this internal sense of fulfillment that you get when you know you have done your best. Life consists of three sections, three parts. One, receipt of stimuli from the world. So the world is constantly throwing stimuli at you, which your sense organs pick up as your ears, eyes, nose, tongue, and skin. These stimuli are gathered by the sense organs and transmitted to the sense center in the mind, where the perception is registered. So if your mind is not behind the perception, like when a child is perhaps watching a video on a phone, on a cell phone, and the mother calls her to dinner, the sound reaches her ears. But because her mind is preoccupied elsewhere, she actually does not hear until the mother shouts and says, "Oh, I'm coming." So there is a receipt of stimuli, there is a registration at the sense center in the mind where there is a reaction between the stimulus that has entered and the desires that are there in the mind, the quality of your mind and intellect. And based on the reaction, there is a response back into the world. So, which we've seen in chapter 3. But these three form the basis of your entire life. Your whole life, you're going around these three. Receipt of stimuli, the three R's. Reaction at the level of the mind and intellect, and response back into the world. So, depending on the state of your mind and intellect, you can change the reaction and response, by which you are no longer dependent on what is coming to you from the world. So, the stimulus may be positive or negative, but if you have a powerful positive mind, you have the capacity of transforming this negative input into a positive reaction, and the action that emerges from you will be positive. This is called attitude control, which Dr. Viktor Frankl discovered and applied when he was in the concentration camp during the Second World War. So he told himself, what are the guards doing? They are just doing their job. But it's up to me to change my attitude so that the negative that they are throwing at me, I convert into positives. And that is how he survived one of the worst concentration camps. This is how you and I can survive the challenges of the world. If he could survive the concentration camp, what you and I are facing is a breeze, nowhere near that. So remember this, it is the mind and intellect and the reaction of the mind and intellect that can convert the most negative experience into a positive one. So now in this section, he further divides these three into 12 and calls them yajnas. So starting from the receipt of the stimulus, the reaction at the mind and intellect level, the response, action back into the world, the pranas, the physiological functions that are happening in your system, and eventually, so the whole circle is completed. And he tells us to convert every one of these into worship by considering it as a yajna. So, in every yajna or every havan, as you may have observed, there are two things that are happening. There is an offering into the havan kund, which is either ghee or grain or pieces of wood, and a kindling. Kindling, the fire shoots up in the ritual. So in these 12 yajnas, he tells us what is the offering and what is the kindling. So when you see, the stimulus enters you, the sight or the sound, let's say sound. The sound enters you. When the sound dies, hearing is kindled. And thus he goes on, so that you cannot escape worship. So when he says that there is an offering and a kindling, worship is going on, yajna is going on. So when you see, hear, smell, taste, touch, think of Atman. When you take a breath, you think of Atman. When you're acting, you think of Atman. When you're doing charity, you think of Atman. So you can't escape the thought of God. Thus, worship becomes a constant awareness of Atman rather than an occasional ritual in the midst of worldly activities. So the core of these 12 yajnas is to trace back all actions to Atman. How does it work? In classical music, the musician aligns himself to the one note sa, which is why the tanpura that is playing that constant note is very important. If the musician can't hear the tanpura, he stops singing. He gets highly irritated. Once he's aligned to that one note sa, he sings a variety of compositions set to different ragas and different talas. And right through this majestic performance, that sa is the constant. But those of us who have not learned classical music, we get disturbed by the tanpura. We say, oh, either the tanpura plays or I sing. I can't do both. So this is called bathroom singing. And why is it called bathroom singing? Because no one can tolerate your singing, so you have no choice but to sing only in the bathroom where there is nobody around. Similarly, classical living happens when one aspect of your mind is rooted to Atman. While the body perceives and acts, the mind feels an array of emotions and the intellect goes through a wide range of thoughts. This is classical living. And classical living makes your personality extremely attractive and you attract the whole world to yourself. Like when Krishna played the flute, all the gopis dropped what they were doing and ran to Krishna. That was the power, the attractiveness, the enchanting music that emerged from the flute. Thus, worship is not a daily ritual. It's not a weekly visit to a temple, church, or mosque, nor is it an annual pilgrimage. Worship is a full-time awareness of Atman. To the extent you fix your attention on Atman, while the body, mind, and intellect engage with the world, you become objective. The intellect is clear, leading to effortless excellence. You're happy as you're unaffected by the world and its fluctuations, and you evolve spiritually. An important aspect of spiritual sadhana is giving. In our culture, every festival, every landmark in life, every function is punctuated by dana or giving, charity. In verse 28, Krishna gives the hierarchy of giving.
द्रव्ययज्ञास्तपो यज्ञाः योगयज्ञास्तथा परे स्वाध्यायज्ञानयज्ञाश्च यतयः संशितव्रताः.
Others give wealth as sacrifice, penance as sacrifice, yoga, the mind and intellect as sacrifice, and ascetics of strict vows give knowledge of self as sacrifice. So, giving is a must. Why must we give? Because we have received so much in life. And compared to what we have received, what we give is next to nothing. It's at best a token of your feeling of gratitude. So, giving comes only when you feel gratitude, when you first of all are aware of all the receipts, all that you have received, rather than focusing on one thing you don't have. Then you should be grateful for all that you have received, which is in abundance and for free, the most precious things. Then there must be that urge to give, to add value to others. And this urge must be so strong that you're looking for something to give. And you can't imagine repaying for all that you have received. So you only give a token. But that token doesn't mean you give little. You give as much as you can. You stretch your resources to give. And this giving must always be there, for the simple reason that the only way of gaining in life is by giving. The more you give, the more you gain. This is a law. And the hierarchy is, first, the lowest is money, because with money you can only buy sense objects. Slightly better than that is you giving your physical body, as it were. You actually go out and work. It's like in this COVID crisis, you can just write a check and donate money. Or you can go out there and think about how you can get, how best to serve the people who are affected. So make food packets, which is what we do. We have worked out the monthly requirements of a family of 4. Oil, rice, dal, so on and so forth, and make a packet and give it to them. So that requires physical effort. Higher than that is you give your emotions. You must feel for the people who are suffering, either in hospital, suffering from the COVID, or the ill effects of it, the economic ill effects. And give of your intellect. As the saying goes, you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. You teach him how to fish, and you feed him for a lifetime. So you share your abilities, your talent, your know-how, your knowledge with people. And the highest is when you gain knowledge of self, because in effect you're giving Atman. Now, when yajna is performed, vasanas or desires reduce. The highest yajna is jnana yajna, by which you gain knowledge of Atman. The preparatory practices are karma yoga, bhakti yoga, and jnana yoga. Knowledge destroys mental agitation and removes the delusion that the world is real. You go about life's activities objectively without involvement. An important tip given by Krishna here is the qualities of a student. To the extent you develop these qualities, you are open to knowledge, you gain more. Pranipata, surrender. Prashna, question. Your intellect must be alert. And seva, service. Again, here it is giving. To the extent you develop these qualities, the Guru, who is Jnaninaha, established in the knowledge, who is an enlightened soul, who has evolved spiritually, and Tattvadarshinaha, who has the capacity to teach, will teach you. Knowledge is gained by sense control, devotion, and Shraddha. Shraddha is the capacity of the intellect to absorb knowledge, reflect upon it till you live it. Then you attain supreme peace. If not, you will not gain success in the world, you will not be happy, and spiritual growth is a far cry. Therefore, establish yourself in yoga, says Krishna. Chapter 5. A fisherman casts his net to 4 kinds of fish. One never gets ensnared in the net and is always free. He sees the net coming and quickly swims away. A few are slow, they get caught in the net but somehow manage to escape. Others are much slower. By the time they realize they are caught, but are striving to get out. The majority of fish, however, bite the net and relax. They are not even aware of the fact that their lives are at stake. Yet a few moments later, they are dead. Similarly, there are 4 kinds of people. Most belong to the fourth category. They're called the bhogis. They are caught in the net of maya, delusion, but are oblivious of its dangers. Worldly and materialistic, they are only interested in acquiring and enjoying the world and are quite content to be bound. There are some who have awakened to a higher dimension and are aware of life's pitfalls. They're making a sincere attempt to free themselves. These are people who have just started the spiritual journey. They are called yogis. A few among them manage to escape and succeed. These are the sannyasis. But rare is the individual who, even while living in the world, remains out of it, ever free. He is the jnani. Chapter 5 describes the 3 categories of spiritual aspirants, the yogi, sannyasi, and jnana, and shows the way out of bondage to liberation. The yogi is one who has just turned inward, but still has a lot of desires. He has to practice the path of action to reduce his desires. The sannyasi has divested his personality of the bulk of his desire and is only focused on realization. He needs the path of knowledge to remove the last few vasanas. The jnani is the enlightened one with 0 vasanas. The jnani has merged with Atman. Actions go on, but he is the unaffected witness of his own actions. The sannyasi dedicates his actions to achieving Brahman and acts like a lotus leaf in water, untouched by the vagaries of the world. So let's take a look at verse 10.
ब्रह्मण्याधाय कर्माणि सङ्गं त्यक्त्वा करोति यः लिप्यतेन स पापेन पद्मपत्रमिवाम्भसा.
One who acts without attachment, dedicating his actions to Brahman, is not tarnished by sin like a lotus leaf in water. So the example of the lotus leaf is brilliant because the lotus leaf is born in the water, it lives its entire life in water and dies in the water, but never is it touched by water because it has a greasy surface. Similarly, a sannyasi whose attention is on realization, who wants to get to Brahman, Brahmani adhaya, dedicating his entire life to Brahman, lives in the world. He's born in the world, he lives in the world, he dies in the world, but is unaffected by what happens in the world because he has this greasy surface of spirituality. So that is the least that we can aspire for. That's the first thing that we need to cultivate within ourselves to protect ourselves from the lashes of the world. So, what we need to do is study the Bhagavad Gita on a daily basis. And these 14 sessions are meant to inspire us to do that. And we have the wherewithal. Like the few verses that are being explained here, the entire Bhagavad Gita, 701 verses, are recited. The Sanskrit is recited, the English translation is given, and the explanation exactly like we are doing here of the entire 701 verses on pen drives. So it's very simple for you to watch or listen. So he lives like a lotus leaf in water and therefore not tarnished by sin. Sin means mental agitations. And the key word here is Sangam Tyaktva, without attachment. How do you not get attached when you attach yourself to something higher? And here a sannyasi is attached to Atman, Brahman. When it comes to the yogi, he acts for self purification because his concept of Atman is not very clear, which is fine. As long as it is something beyond your selfish, self centered interests, you're on the right path. So we take a look at verse 13 now, which takes us to renunciation, which is the core of this chapter.
सर्वकर्माणि मनसा सन्न्यस्यास्ते सुखं वशी नवद्वारे पुरे देहि नैव कुर्वन्न कारयन्.
Having renounced all actions by the mind, the self controlled embodied rests in the nine gated city, neither acting nor causing to act. So, renunciation is not physical, it is mental. And yet, when we speak of renunciation, or when you think of a renounced person, you think of a person who has given up material things. And since that doesn't appeal to you, you give up renunciation itself, which is a pity because you don't benefit from the tremendous positives that renunciation offers. Renunciation is giving up desire and attachment that come in the way of perfect action. So action continues. You only give up that which comes in the way. Renunciation is understanding the right value of all that is in the world, which is zero. Renunciation is not life denying. It is an exhilarating confidence in life's high calling. It's the turning away of a trivial now for a momentous future. The sacrifice of an easy this for a beckoning yet to be. A sports person who turns his back on every indulgence for the trophy gets the trophy and enjoys the celebration. Renunciation is not giving up action, it is acting in a spirit of renunciation. It's not giving up things that are dear to you. It is growing to appreciate far more fulfilling avenues of enjoyment. It's not shunning the world and living a life of denial. It is weeding out that which prevents you from enjoying the world. So, there is more to renunciation than what you think it is. Then he moves on to describe the jnani. The jnani acts dynamically, renouncing desire and anxiety for the fruit of action. He's self-controlled because he has no value for what the world has to offer. And paripurna, totally fulfilled. He is not pressurized to do anything or go anywhere. So he neither acts nor causes any activity. As you focus on Atman and direct the body, mind, and intellect towards that goal, your vasanas gradually reduce and you reach the state of non-return. The state of realization is one with no vasanas. Vasana means ignorance, because you have reached the state of complete knowledge, which is why you're paripurna. You then have equal vision towards all, and you have no more rebirth because the fuel of vasanas is not there. You find happiness in the self and obtain eternal bliss, which is the goal of all humans. So in verse 22, Krishna shows us a wise person's view of sense contact. Verse 22.
ये हि संस्पर्शजा भोगाः दुःखयोनय एव ते आद्यन्तवन्तः कौन्तेय न तेषु रमते बुधः.
O Kaunteya, contact-born pleasures are only wombs of sorrow. They have a beginning and an end. The wise one does not delight in them. Nateshu ramate buddhaha. So, in this verse, he points out a very basic truth, which is sense objects and the pleasures that come from the sense contact are actually wombs of sorrow. They may give you pleasure in the moment. So, the law of life is that anything that gives you instant pleasure gives you agony and pain in the end. And that which is painful in the beginning unfolds into everlasting happiness. Take examples. To wake up early in the morning and study the Bhagavad Gita is like torture. To get out of bed and exercise again is painful. To eat healthy food is, people call it hospital food. On the other hand, junk food is so tasty. To laze around is so nice. And not to study the Bhagavad Gita is, of course, pleasant. But the result is terrible. So, the wise person is one who understands this. It doesn't mean that he doesn't enjoy worldly contacts or that he has no capacity to enjoy sense contact. It's not that. But he understands this basic truth. The second thing that happens with indulgence in sense objects is that only the first contact gives you 100% enjoyment. Every successive contact with the same object reduces the joy content. And if you indulge indiscriminately in it, the return from it, the enjoyment comes down to zero. But you have to continue the contact with the object because not having it gives you sorrow. So you alternate between no pleasure and sorrow. For how long will you go on? So it leads to problems like depression, bad moods, and all of this. So a wise person understands it and keeps away from unrestricted, unintelligent, indiscriminate indulgence in worldly objects. He also understands they are temporary, passing, ephemeral, impermanent. They have a beginning and an end. The wise one does not delight in them, which means the rest of us who are opting for instant pleasure all the time, we are utter fools. Because for a few moments of pleasure, we are sacrificing a lifetime of happiness. So this does not mean that you must not have instant pleasure. It only means your intellect must be alert and control the contact so that you remain with 100% enjoyment till the last day of your life. So the wise one endures the force of desire, is happy within. His happiness stems from inside him, not the world. Is free from desire and anger, which drives you to the cycle of birth and death, and which is a test of spiritual evolution, rejoices in the welfare of all. Sarva Bhuta Hite Rataha. Today, we rejoice in people's downfall. And we can be happy only when good things happen to us. Expand your circle of oneness to include larger circles like your extended family, the community, Mumbaikars or the city in which you live, the country, and extend to all of humanity, all living beings. So when you feel one with the country, with your countrymen, if any Indian does well anywhere in the world, you feel ecstatic and you celebrate as if the achievement was yours. Today, you're in a state where if the brother-in-law buys a Mercedes, you get heartburn. That's not the way to be, because then your happiness shrinks. So then a person, when you develop this capacity of sarva bhuta hite rataha, the capacity to revel, rejoice in the well-being of all creatures, then you gain total liberation. So this portion is a precursor to the 6th chapter, which is titled Dhyana Yoga, the yoga of meditation, which we will do tomorrow. So please remember that every day we have these sessions for 14 days, by which time we will complete the overview of all 18 chapters. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. What you have just heard is an overview of chapters 4 and 5. For the verse-by-verse explanation of all 18 chapters by Jayaji, get the pen drives on the Bhagavad Gita from our website vedantavision.org. Thank you. We look forward to having you with us tomorrow.
ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्ति